So we're going to talk about 210.8, which is ground fault circuit interrupters. It's ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel. The protection for personnel is very important, especially when you start talking about ground fault protection.
Right, because there are all kinds of ground fault protection for different purposes.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, so just as an overview, 210.8, ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel. We'll have parent text. We'll have first level subdivision. A is for dwelling units. B is other than dwelling units. C is cross space lighting outlets. That'll be an interesting discussion. D is specific appliances. E is equipment requiring servicing. F, which is the last one, is outdoor outlets. Do you think there's any controversy in 210.8?
Just some.
It's the truth. Well, I always said, if it wasn't for GFCI and all the locations, if we just had GFCI protection everywhere, we could probably eliminate about 50% of the defined terms in Article 100.
At least terms regarding locations, because as soon as you require something to be somewhere, you need a location and you need it defined. Otherwise, you don't know where you should put things.
That's right. And that's why definitions, defined terms are really important, even for ground fault circuit interrupter, GFCI, right? Because we have ground fault circuit interrupter requirements, which we're going to talk about. I mean, we should go over to Article 100 and talk about the definition of what a ground fault circuit interrupter.
Good place to start, so we know what we're talking about.
I need my spectacles. Do you need spectacles? I do. All right. So they moved all of the defined terms to Article 100 for the NEC 2023. So it's something to keep in mind. But no matter what edition of the code you're on, ground fault circuit interrupter, the GFCI is found in Article 100. Okay, are you ready?
Always.
All right, let's read it. I'm going to read the definition of a GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupter. A device intended for the protection of personnel that functions to de-energize a circuit or portion thereof within an established period of time when a ground fault current exceeds the values established for a Class A device.
Right. So anywhere this term is used in the code is a ground fault circuit interrupter. We're talking about Class A devices, and that was clarified recently.
Yes. Now, and why that phrase for a Class A device, the clearing time values, current exceeds, not the clearing time, but the current exceeds the values established. So that's like the pickup.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
For a Class A device. And the reason that's really important is there are Class C, Ds, and E's as well. Class B is no longer out there, but you have a Class A, Class C, D, and E. And in the later edition, this edition, the 2023 edition, introduced the term special purpose ground fault circuit interrupter.
Right.
And that is a Class C, D, or E, which is a different pickup value than a GFCI.
Yes.
It's very important that it's a Class A device. Standard is UL 943. So UL 943 class is the title of UL 943 is Standard for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupters. And the informational note in the defined term for the definitions tells us that a Class A GFCI trips when the ground fault current is 6 milliamps or higher. The typical range is around 4 to 6.
Yeah, about 4 to 6, and the 6 being the upper range.
Yeah. So below 4 shall not trip. Above 6, it shall trip. And the 4 to 6, that gives you your margin of error.
Sure.
All right. So anything we talk about in 210.8 is a Class A GFCI. So, and John, would you agree? Anywhere where you use just GFCI, it's a Class A device.
Yes, by definition.
By which we just read. So awesome. Okay. Now, so let's do this in stages. Now we know what the definition is. We sort of had the overview of 210.8. We know we're talking about a Class A device. We re-emphasize that in the parent text of 8. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the architecture of a section, how the parent text, that's the text in 210.8, and how does that relate to the rest of the first level subdivisions within a section?
Right. So you have your article 210, you have your section .8, and anytime you have subsections after that, and in this case, these are A, B, C, D, E, and F, which you just briefly summarized. The parent text becomes what's also known as the charging text. So the charging text is universal to all of those subsections.
Right.
And so if take a moment and what is that charging text? So
It says a listed Class A GFCI shall provide protection in accordance with 210.8 A through F. That's the first sentence. So it tells us that a Class A GFCI has to provide protection in accordance with A through F of 210.8. And it says the GFCI shall be installed in a readily accessible location. That's the first little paragraph.
right,
That tells you, to our point earlier, it's Class A.
right,
That's the trips at greater than 6 milliamps. And it's a UL 943 device. So that tells us a lot right there. And it reemphasizes, even though we already said it's a GFCI, we didn't really have to say again that's a Class A device.
No, you didn't, because qualified in the definition. And furthermore, here it says in a readily accessible location. So that means that, let's say you go down to crawl spaces or any of these other subsections, they don't have to say it's readily accessible in every location. This is why it's very important whenever you're looking at the code, you just don't go right to the section that's of apparent interest, because you're not getting the whole story until you get it in its proper context. And in the charging of apparent text should always be taken into account, because a lot of mistakes can be made. You're either going to not comply with the code, or you're going to over comply with the code and make an installation that might be, in many cases, unnecessary.
You know what? That reminds me. Context. If you made it, what before we make an error here, we have to understand the context of 210.8. 210.8 is in part 1, the general part. It's the general requirements for all branch circuits, because Article 210 is branch circuits not over 1,000 volts AC, 1,500 volts DC nominal. So to your point, you need to go all the way up. We know we're in Chapter 2, wiring and protection. We know we're into Article 210, branch circuits. Then we know we're in Part 1, general provisions. Now, Part 2 are branch circuit ratings. Part 3 is required outlets. So in some cases, it may have an impact, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, what are you thinking?
Well, I think it is. Why don't you going backwards, Tom? Let's go all the way back to 90.3, which tells us how to use Chapter 2.
Oh, man, you're right. You're right.
Because this is Chapter 2. This is GFCI protection for branch circuits. So since 90.3 says Chapter 2 applies generally,
That's right.
so this is going to apply to all GFCIs, all branch circuits in the entire code book, unless they're modified by the select articles in Chapter 4, as outlined also in 210, but also in chapters 5, 6, and 7.
That's exactly right. So that's a really important piece, because we ran into some issues during the 17 code. Well, we ran into issues, I think it was during 17, or was it 20, that we expanded to beyond just 15 and 20 amp circuits, right? When we expanded beyond 15 and 20 amp circuits in A and B, we had language in the back of the book in chapters 5 and 6 and 7 that, well, let's talk RV parts. We had RV parts that just said 15 and 20 amp circuits. Okay, marinas, same way. We could go to various places in chapters 5 and 6. where they specifically called out a 15 to 20 ampere circuit. And then we said, well, wait a second. We've just expanded. Which do you follow? Do you follow what's back in chapter 5 and 6, which is only for 15 and 20? Or do you go to 210.8b because 210.8b didn't exist before the 90s, early 90s. So it was 93 code, somewhere in there. I can't remember. I'll put that down here, exactly when 210.8b went in. So before that, we relied on 5, 6, and 7 for the GFCI requirements. And 210.8 only applied to dwelling units.
Mm-hmm.
So then we expanded that, but everything was in nice order and everything aligned until we went beyond 15 and 20 amp circuits. So that whole thought process of 90.3, what applies, what trumps what, is very important to understand.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, that's not even all of the parent text. You called it the charging text.
Some people have called it that. I've heard it called both. I use parent text. Yeah. I've heard other people call it charging text. And, whoever's watching this may have heard either term.
Pilset.
All right. So now the next paragraph. Now they have an informational note right after that paragraph. And it says to see 215.9 for GFCI protection on feeders. Now, we had, during the 2023 cycle, we removed some informational notes, which were pointers elsewhere. But for some reason, we elected to keep the informational note for 215.9, realizing that there are GFCI requirements back in the back of the book, right? We can't point to them all. So we removed some of those informational notes that pointed back to GFCI and Article 422 for appliances, sure, things like that. Right. So we kept this one. So you got to remember, what this is telling us is that if I have a receptacle for this refrigerator, I can put the GFCI protection in a receptacle, but the receptacle has to be readily accessible.
Sure.
Right? I can put it in a circuit breaker in a panel board, which has to be readily accessible by right, other requirements in the code. I could also put it on a feeder upstream, as long as if I test that circuit, as long as I am protected by GFCI,
yeah, you can.
I can put it in a feeder. I can put, now you have other challenges of leakage current
sure,
and things like that. But the fact that doesn't tell me where the GFCI protection needs to be, it's just telling me that I need to be protected.
Yeah, and so you could be protected by the GFCI receptacle ahead of the appliance or at the breaker level, many places.
Absolutely. Now,
although I think that feeder one would be pretty rarely used. I know they said you can protect. If your feeder's GFCI protected, then the whole thing is protected. But I think that's rather a rare. I cannot think of any time that's ever been used. It's just a rather
where I heard it was used when it first came up when we had the dialogue. They were talking about swimming pool pump motors and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And they said,
sure, that's a feeder.
Yes,
sure.
If I put it in my panel and I just put the GFCI protection out there, it's protecting everything that's connected. And in some cases, some people were saying, "Oh no, you can't do that."
Right.
But you can. And in my opinion, you don't even need that language. You don't need it in 215.9.
No.
But we put it there for clarity. So in any case, the next paragraph of the parent text, we're still not done with parent text, charging language. Next paragraph says, for the purposes of this section, which is 210.8, the distance from receptacles shall be measured as the shortest path the power supply cord connected to the receptacle would follow without piercing a floor, wall, ceiling, or fixed barrier. Now that's important language because now we're talking about the measurement. Well, we don't tell you what the measurement is. We don't say the measurement from a sink, the measurement from whatever. We just said the measurement.
Right. And so each of these subsections have an implied measurement about from a sink or so forth.
Yeah. So it could be from the receptacle to the sink. Ooh. In B, we said from a fixed or stationary appliance to a sink.
Mm-hmm.
But this charging text says the path the power supply cord connected to the receptacle would follow. We need to fix that language. It should say from the receptacle or
The location of your appliance?
Yeah, because we're starting to key in B on the location of the appliance, and that applies to B as well. That's a challenge. That's language. I don't think it would impact the application of 210.8 because we're pretty clear in B, but that charging text, to your point, applies to B. And we made a recent change recognizing it's a measurement from the appliance to the sink, not the receptacle. And that measurement, this says from the receptacle, is how you do a measurement. And we have the details of the measurement in each of the sections. Do you see what I'm saying? Am I smoking something now?
I don't know, folks. I think you're onto something.
I'm onto something.
I'm going to have to look at it. I mean, if for no other reason than for consistency.
Yes.
And we need to be consistent in how these things are applied. And so that could be an area where more consistency could be added, more clarification.
This is how public inputs are generated as you read and try to understand the code language. When you read something that doesn't seem to make sense, you bounce it off of somebody else. We're going to have this discussion. You know what's going to happen. We'll probably have this discussion with other people on panel 2 and possibly electrical inspectors because they're the ones enforcing a lot of the rules and some contractors. And if they all agree, if they all go, yeah, you know what? And then we'll craft language to fix this and bam, you've got a public input for the next edition of the code.
Wow.
All right. And that's all that the parent text says. So parent text needs to be class A, needs to be readily accessible, and information on how you do the measurement.
Yep.
That's it.
What do we got in A?
All right, we're going to move to A. 210.8A is dwelling units. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us we're talking about GFCIs in dwelling units only. And parent text of 210.8A is going to set the stage for all of the locations.
All the list items.
All the list items. Here we go. All 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles installed in the following locations and supplied by single-phase branch circuits rated 150 volts or less to ground shall have ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel.
So one thing it says here is it says receptacles.
Yeah.
Okay. This is not receptacle outlets, it's receptacles. So as long as those receptacles are protected, not the outlet, so we don't have to worry about the wiring being protected. It's just the receptacle itself. And like we said before, that can be done at the breaker level. It can be done at the receptacle level. A GFCI receptacles have a line side and a load side, so you can feed the downstream devices and protect those non-GFCI receptacles with a GFCI receptacle. So as long as that receptacle is protected, we have to protect the wiring, but just the receptacle.
A GFCI in the cord of the appliance would not meet this because the receptacle is not protected.
Exactly right. Because our goal is the receptacle, not necessary. I mean, which leads to protecting the equipment to some extent, but the focus here is the receptacle.
And it's all 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles. So that would be the rating of the receptacle, not the branch circuit.
Correct.
Because that is the 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles. And then we clarified further that we said when those receptacles are on a branch circuit that's rated 150 volts or less to ground. What does that mean? 150 volts or less to ground. A single phase, which would be 120 volts to ground.
Sure.
What if it's a 2-pole?
Typical 120, 240, your voltage to ground is going to be that 120 volts to ground.
Exactly.
So that would still apply.
That would still apply. So we're talking single phase. When you have 2 hot conductors and a neutral, or just 2 hot conductors and no neutral, it's still, from each hot conductor to ground, it's still 120 volts. Hot line, right. The line is still 240, right. But this says branch circuits rated 150 volts or less to ground.
But so that would take care of your 120 208 systems, 120 240 volt systems.
Respect. Yeah, 208 as well. Okay, so now we set up the stage that says you have to have any of the receptacles of those ratings on branch circuits of those ratings that supply or where the receptacles are in a bathroom, garages and accessory buildings that have a floor located at or below grade level, not intended as habitable rooms and limited to storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use, outdoors, crawl spaces at or below grade level, basements, kitchens, areas with sinks and permanent provisions for food prep, beverage prep, that was a change, or cooking, sinks where the receptacles are installed within 6 foot from the top inside edge of the bowl of the sink, boathouses, I said that, boathouses, I was going to say bathroom, boathouses, bathtubs or shower stalls where receptacles are installed within 6 foot of the outside edge of the bathtub or shower stall, laundry areas, and indoor damp and wet locations. You want to talk about each of these locations? Or some of them? Sure. Let's talk bathrooms. Now, this is the importance of understanding defined terms.
Right. And going back to my earlier statement, a lot of these terms for definitions and locations are here because of GFCI protection.
Yeah, because the moment you have a GFCI requirement for a bathroom, nobody knows what a bathroom is.
No.
That's not a bathroom. Well, wait a second. It's got a commode, a shower, a sink. Oh, that's not a bathroom. It's a...
What does it have to have?
It's a have-to-have room. So here's the definition of a bathroom. An area including a sink with one or more of the following. So it has to have a sink.
Yep.
The area has to have a sink plus one or more of the following: a toilet, a urinal, a tub, a shower, a bidet, or similar plumbing fixtures. So if I have a sink and a tub, it's a bathroom. A sink and a shower, but no tub, a bathroom. And a sink and a shower, but no commode, no toilet, no bidet, just a sink and a shower, it's a bathroom. But if I have a shower and a toilet and no sink, it's no longer a bathroom.
Correct.
I don't like.
Well, hygiene's important. You have to wash your hands. And that's where the term "the area" comes into play. Okay, because this was changed a long time ago, where you might have I'll say 2 rooms.
Yeah.
Okay. One room just has a toilet in it, has a door.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then outside of that area, let's say we put a receptacle in there for whatever reason.
Well, I can tell you the reason. You're going to put a bidet.
Okay.
One of those
sure.
toilet seat bidets.
Oh, yeah, sure. So you need a receptacle in there for whatever reason. That would be a good one.
Yep.
And then outside that door, you have a basin and a shower, or just a basin. Okay. And someone would argue that that toilet is in a separate room.
Right.
Therefore, because there's a door there and as a separate room. So therefore that receptacle does not need to be GFCI protected because it's not in a bathroom. And that's why they changed the term to area quite some time ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a little research could be done on that. But I want to say 99, 96. It was a long time ago.
I'll tell you what, it's probably scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. If I want to get my future thinking cap on, there we go. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen.
Oh,
wow.
you can see things I don't.
I can see it. So it's important to understand what a bathroom is because we have a GFCI requirement for the receptacles that are in a bathroom. That was your cue to say a bathroom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna work.
We're making it very clear that this is not a scripted presentation.
That's right. We don't script anything because that's how we roll. The second one is garages.
Well, you know, another advantage of that is that we can respond to these discussions as we come out. Otherwise, we would not have talked about the appliance issue.
Yeah, no, that's right.
That's right. And this is what happens with code. You I mean, I served on a code making panel for several cycles, right? And so have you. And you can look at the same sentence for years and years and years, and you'll see it differently, or someone else will see it differently. And then they say, well, what about this word here? Take into account, if you don't mind me skipping ahead,
Yeah.
was it item number 7? Is that right? About
Areas with sinks. Yeah.
and food preparation.
Yep.
Yeah. So food preparation or cooking is what it says there.
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
And people look at that and they say, well, why did your panel do that? That's the same thing as a kitchen.
That's right.
It's not the same thing as a kitchen because a kitchen is food preparation and cooking.
Yeah.
So if I go and have an area where I'm making my coffee and all of that, I'm making a beverage. I'm not cooking, but I'm doing some preparation.
Yeah.
That warrants GFCI protection now.
Absolutely right.
Whereas before, people would say that's not a kitchen, even though you've got everything in a kitchen, really.
Yeah.
But
Well, and so the other debate I've heard, and why I love being a member of the IAEI and going to IAEI meetings.
indeed,
We have had those debates of, I have a microwave. So I have this area. I have a sink, I have cups, I have a coffee pot, and I have a microwave. Is it a kitchen? Right? But when you look at the definition of a kitchen, it says permanent provisions for cooking, right? So you go, okay, a microwave is not permanent. But then I'll have somebody come up to the microphone and go, well, hold on. What happens if I mount the microwave in the cabinet, right? Like I think we have one over here. You mount the microwave in the cabinet and it's a part of the cabinets. It's permanent. It's not coming out. It's fixed to the wall. Yeah. And in some cases, they're hardwired.
A microwave hood system or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they go, well, is that permanent provisions for cooking? Does it now become a kitchen because it has a sink and it has permanent provisions for cooking? And then I've heard inspectors on both sides of the fence. They don't like the microwave thing. But then they'll say, well, how do I argue against if you mount the microwave to the wall? Is it permanent? Yeah. It's just like a stove.
Yeah.
I could have a little one of those little ovens that I plug in and that's remote. But the moment I take one of those little ovens, which has the coil of electric, and I make it a little bit bigger and I mount it and I fix it in place, and now it becomes a permanent provisions for cooking. So microwaves could meet that definition. But I always say, check with your AHJ on whether or not you meet the definition of a kitchen, because that's a big deal.
Right. And that's another thing, is that the code needs to be flexible enough to allow AHJ some leeway. I mean, this is a case of be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Because if you make the code so hard and, cut and dried in every single location, in fact, you can add more gray area to the code by adding more detail.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good point. We just had that discussion today or yesterday. It was yesterday.
Yeah,
at an IEI meeting in West by God, Virginia. So the other one is garages. Now the second list, we're gonna cherry pick here. We're just gonna pick a few. Garages and also accessory buildings that have a floor located at or below grade level, not intended as habitable rooms and limited to storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use. Okay, any receptacle in those locations. Now, if I go to the definition of garages, and you and I were just talking about this, and I know you were looking at me like I was crazy, and you probably still are. Let's look at the definition of a garage. A garage is a building. Yeah, I love this.
I know where you're going.
A building or portion of a building in which one or more self-propelled vehicles can be kept for use, sale, storage, rental, repair, exhibition, or demonstration purposes. Well, I was talking about this book in a different venue, and I said my shed, which I always call a shed, meets the definition of a garage because I park my tractor, which is a self-propelled vehicle, in that space. Now, you brought up now, let's just talk about definitions real quick. When we use a term in the code, we go back to Article 100 to find out what the definition is. Now, the definition will use other terms. I do not have a definition of the word vehicle in the National Electrical Code. I'm just going to do a double check because I said that yesterday and there was. All right. There's no definition of a vehicle. So what do? We go to Webster's Dictionary and we look at what is the definition of vehicle.
Why are you going to Webster's? Where are you getting that information from?
Okay, so that's a good question. The NEC, not the manual of style.
The style manual.
The style manual does. Well, the style manual does now, I think.
Yes, I forget that.
It didn't before, but I'm almost positive that it does now. We'll double check it. But I know there is a reference with NFPA that tells you if there's not a defined term in the code, then you go to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, Collegiate Dictionary, 26th edition. Okay? We can debate on whether or not the online edition is the 26th edition. That's the details. But another source that you could go to if you have a term that is not defined in the NEC is the building code. Remember, we want to align our requirements with the building code. So if you do have, like, for existence, a basement, we don't have the definition of a basement. The building code may have a definition, which it does, of a basement. Now, would I go to Webster and use the definition in Webster over the definition in another standard that I am using for construction? I probably wouldn't. It's not necessarily written anywhere, but I think every NEAHJ would understand the fact that they want consistency. So if I go to Webster for a vehicle, because the building code probably doesn't have vehicle defined, I would think not. I haven't checked that though. It says a means of carrying or transporting something. That's pretty doggone vague.
And it is pretty darn, yeah.
Now, your thought process, remember you said, what about a lawnmower that's walk behind?
Well, you started this. So,
but
it doesn't really carry something.
Yes, it does.
Oh, a bag of grass?
It carries a bag of grass. Take the bag of grass off and it's no longer a vehicle.
Yeah, so in mulching mode. I think we're getting way off track.
We are. But in my opinion, here's the thing. This is what happens in the field, right? You have a definition, you have a defined term, you have requirements that are associated with that, and I can have a differences of opinion. I can look at my shed and say, that's a garage. And you could say, no, it's just a little outbuilding shed.
Right.
But I could go and I could prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it meets the definition. But we probably wouldn't hold that shed to all of the requirements of a garage. Because it's an outbuilding, right? So there's some level of practicality in these requirements that you have to have, because if it's not resolvable and you definitely don't agree with that, then you know what you do? You make a public input to add the clarity, which is why we see some of the requirements in the code around the code language. All right, so we covered bathrooms. We know what the definition is. We talked a little bit about garages. I love that one. I just love that one. It's like a rabbit hole. You just got to go down. There is a lesson to be learned there. Outdoors, I think, is pretty self-explanatory.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Crawl spaces, that's another one. What's a crawl space? We tried to define it on panel 2, remember?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And you know what threw me for a loop? Was when the Petrochem guys, Charlie, we were sitting there talking about a crawl space, and we said, well, what's a crawl space? Crawl space is something, we said, well, what's the height of certain things? 6 foot? Well, let's say it's got to be less than 4 foot or less than 6 foot, because you're going to have to at least bend over, right? And then Charlie goes, I have a crawl space that's got a 20-foot ceiling. Oh my gosh. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you possibly have a crawl space that has a 20-foot ceiling? And he did, because of all the stuffs He has pipes. He has ventilation. When you take that room that has, because we were saying a room with less than 6 foot or a 6 foot ceiling or something like that, we keyed it off of the ceiling. And he says, well, I have a crawl space that's in this room with a 20-foot ceiling. We were like, I get it now because of all the equipment that goes in there. All right, so we got the crawl spaces. So we don't have a definition, but I would say go back to the building code, or you just know it when you see it. And it's a good debatable point with your AHJ.
More coffee?
I think we're going to have more coffee. Perfect. Ooh. Salute.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, indeed.
It's good coffee. All right. We're back. We were talking 210.8a. We hit bathrooms, we had garages, we had outdoors, crawl spaces. We already said definition, basements. Basements is another one. We went back, we said, follow the definition in the building code, because the building code has some really clear definitions of basements. And I think in the 2026, we may have entered a definition. I can't remember if we did or not. Kitchens, we already talked kitchens. Areas with sinks, we already talked about that. Sink, where the receptacles are installed within 6 foot. Boathouses, we know what a boathouse is.
Well, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Receptacles are installed within 6 feet of a sink. This is that dimension we talked about in the parent language. Okay, as for travelers.
Yep.
So it's possible that if I had a sink and adjacent to a doorway, and I could.
Oh yeah.
And if I have a receptacle on the other side of that wall, that receptacle would need to be GFCI protected.
That's right.
Using the cord as an imaginary cord. That's the key thing, because we don't want to encourage people to put a cord through a door and pinch it. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What was being said is, as a means of measurement, imagine if a cord was plugged into that receptacle, could it reach that sink? Could that?
Because remember the parent text. So that's a very good point. The parent text talked about the shortest path that a power supply cord connected to the receptacle would follow without piercing a floor, wall, ceiling, or fixed barrier. It used to have door in there, and it used to have window.
Yeah.
Right? So window, we just took out.
Yep.
We just took out, and we took out door last cycle, because the debate was that if you have a receptacle in under the counter sink that was for the garbage disposal, that because that cabinet is a door, when you open that door, the receptacle that's on the back, the conductor would have to penetrate that door, and it's a cabinet door. You could also make the same argument around the, they call it appliance garages that roll up. That's a door. So because of the confusion, we just said, let's remove door. Then we have people complain about the window. And Panel 2 said, we're just going to remove window. And they removed window from the list. So now it's the only obstacles that would prevent you for that measurement would be a floor, a wall, a ceiling, or a fixed barrier. So back to your point, because we took door out, you have that receptacle. If on the other side of the wall, if I measure 6 foot, 6 foot? Yeah, 6 foot. From that receptacle over to the inside edge of the sink, even though it's on the other side, even though it's in a different room, I would still need to protect it.
A lot of people get upset about this. They say, but another GFCI where I probably don't need it. But really, when you think about the requirements of receptacle placement, as I walk through that door, if this is a required receptacle, and it's a room, not a hallway, for example. So I don't need a receptacle until I'm 6 feet away from that doorway anyway.
Yeah.
So the only thing I need to do is probably move that receptacle over one more stud bay or something like that. And GFCI protection would be no longer needed. So it's just with a little careful planning, the
But
additional.
yes, but yes. But here's my problem. When you first started, you said your GFCI, providing GFCI protection for a receptacle that doesn't need it. That makes a basic fundamental assumption that it's the sink and it's the proximity to the sink that is the hazard. In my opinion,
Okay.
I don't need water to shock somebody.
I agree with you.
No,
I was thinking in context.
you were, but that is
Definitely according to the minimal requirements of the code.
exactly.
That better?
That's better. I feel
I like that better too, I have to admit. But it's important to clarify that
Yeah,
because,
absolutely right.
you know, I've had grandkids when they're young, they'll be crawling on the floor and they'll pick up a lamp cord and put it in their mouth,
That's exactly right.
so.
And then if you look at these, like somebody was talking, there was I believe it was in the CPSC database. There was an individual, two instances. One, an individual in one of these reclining chairs that's plugged in, and it was electric. The cord caught, and he was electrocuted in the chair. There was another example of an individual who was laying in bed with one of those heat blankets that are plugged in. It failed, and they didn't die. She didn't die, or he didn't die. I don't know who was in the bed, but was shocked on that heating blanket. Okay, could have been a lot worse.
Indeed, yes.
So there are instances of people, and I could give you example after example of areas where the hazard. I don't need water to shock somebody.
Nope.
So that's my issue, and so I mean I'm not shy about saying my house, all of my receptacles, all of my loads in my home are GFCI protected. I put them, that's important to me. Now, does it need to be a code requirement? In my mind, I'd love to see that happen. I could take all of these defined terms. I don't need to know what all of these different. Now I have to know what a kitchen is because there are requirements about pulling 2 circuits and things like that. But I could remove a lot of debate and angst.
When you look at all these items here, how many items are we up to now?
We got 12 items,
So
12 locations.
12 locations, 12 areas. It's not much more until you have the whole dwelling unit anyway in those instances.
And when you marry the GFCI with the ASCI protection, right?
Yeah,
you don't have GFCI in the living room, but you have ASCI in the living room. I don't have GFCI in the dining room, but I have ASCI in the dining room. So you have electronically protected, but an AFCI does not provide shock protection. And it's not much more to just add GFCI to that device and now have a dual function device and provide both levels of protection. And now you prevent your electrical fires and you prevent accidental shock and electrocution. So, but right now you have to elect to go above and beyond. And I'm on my soapbox. I'm allowed because I'm the one running the record button.
That's right.
All right. So we have boathouses, talked about sinks, bathtubs, or shower stalls. And this is interesting. So bathtub or shower stalls where receptacles are installed within 6 foot of the outside edge of a bathtub or shower stall. Now, you would say, oh, wait a second.
Bathroom.
It's already a bathroom. If it's a bathtub or shower stall, it's a bathroom, but not necessarily.
No.
Because it could be, you could have a bathtub and no sink, no commode. It's just a bathtub in a room for whatever reason. Maybe you have spa day in your house or something, right? This is dwelling units only. If I have a bathtub or if I have a shower stall, I might have an area off of my garage where I come in and I have a shower stall there because, hey, I'm outside, I'm doing work. I want to come in, shuck my clothes, put them in a hamper, take a quick shower, and then I go in the house, right? That's not a bathroom. It's not a laundry. It's an area that basically just has a shower. If I have a receptacle within 6 feet, then it needs to be GFCI protected. So you're covering all those different little bases. How about laundry areas? Is there a definition for a laundry area?
Yes, there is. If memory serves, there is a definition for a laundry area. And I think it really originated, believe it or not, back in manufactured homes.
Really?
I think so.
Hold on, let's take a look. Ladies and
Because
gentlemen.
prior to this, before this became here, the laundry areas in this, I think we referred to laundry areas as it was practically, it's also back in manufactured homes.
Here we go. You ready for this definition?
Sure. Are we going to put a tractor in the laundry room?
Oh, this is wrong. But I am going to put a laundry tray.
Yeah. Yeah. There you
Okay.
go.
So, an area containing or designed to contain a laundry tray, clothes washer, or clothes dryer.
I don't even want to touch laundry tray, but here we are. We have that term area again. So in many homes, you have a closet basically that has a washer and dryer in it.
That's right. Could be your basement.
It's not a room.
That's right.
Off the hallway, you got the little accordion doors. Okay. And that's a laundry room,
That's
laundry area.
laundry area.
Yeah.
I've seen those. Well, I've not seen it. My wife would love to put one up in the bedroom upstairs. She's like, man, I wish we had a little laundry area up here. We were talking about putting something in the bathroom, but then we don't have a room in our master bath.
Upstairs laundry areas are great until you move in or you move out.
It's true. Or until you have a water issue,
Yeah.
you know? But what I used to think a laundry tray was, at least I knew I'm going there. I used to think that a laundry tray, before I got an education, I used to explain to people, well, a laundry tray is what that tray they put under a washing machine, that in case the washing machine breaks, it dumps water and it would collect the water and drain it out. So that's what I thought a
familiar with
laundry
those.
tray was, right? But that's not a laundry tray. A laundry tray are those, like you see, sometimes they're porcelain, but sometimes they're those plastic basin sinks with water.
They look like a janitor. Well, it's
Yeah.
like a janitor sink and a janitor's closet,
Yeah.
kind of like that.
Yes. And since we don't have a defined term, I'm going to go to Webster. Oh, yeah. You know I had to go here. Laundry tray. We're going to take a look at what does Merriam-Webster call. Now, if you just search laundry tray, look, you get all of those basins like that, right? Some of them have, I would call that a sink. If it had a faucet on it, I'd call it a sink.
And you can wash clothes in that.
You can wash clothes in it. That's exactly right. Laundry tray definition: a fixed tub as of slate, earthenware, soapstone, enameled iron, or porcelain. I love the earthenware. I love that. Reminds me of dishes. When running water and drain pipe for washing clothes and other household, with running water and drain pipe for washing clothes and other household linens. So that's a bigger basin, and it has, and you see some of them are, earthenware, soapstone, whatever. In the olden days, when I was young, we had a laundry tray that had two big bins, and it was cement. And it was very heavy and was on a metal rack. We ended up busting it up to get it out of the basement because we could not carry it out. It was so heavy. But and that would be probably the earthenware. I don't know. But anyhow, I don't know what earthenware is. I'm not gonna look it up. But anyhow, it's not I don't, if I just have that, right? Because it says an area containing a laundry tray. Or, so it's any one of those. If I just had that laundry tray, which is designed with a sink, well, I would call it a sink. But it's very important, the distinction, because this says the area. That means it's not the receptacle within 6 foot of that laundry tray. It's all receptacles in that area.
I think that's where an HJ would come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm saying this is what I would considering to be the area for your laundry activities. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Because you know what? Doesn't matter what I say or what you say.
That's
Yeah,
right.
HJ.
That's right.
Yep. All right.
And another thing along with that,
And another thing.
as long as we're talking about code and
Yeah.
HJs and opinions,
Uh-huh.
you and I are just kind of more or less spontaneously decided to sit down here and talk about code.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is just our opinions.
That's right.
Ultimately, your HJ is the one that you need to consult with.
Absolutely.
And local authority having jurisdiction, whoever he or she is.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, so we bring up AHJs. AHJs it's a tremendous opportunity to learn from an AHJ.
Oh,
There are so many times when I have talked to people and they said, John, do I have to do this? The AHJ made me do this. And I would say something like, well, why did they make you do that? I don't know. So I just did it.
Yeah.
So you just lost a tremendous opportunity to lose something.
Yeah.
And to learn something. And, you would lose a lot of time because in the future, you might be doing that same thing over and over and over again, and it may not always apply.
That's exactly right. Or there was a case that I had where the inspector was requiring something that was not a requirement in the code, right? So the electrician asked me about it, and my answer was, well, have them tell you what section of the code you're violating. And when they couldn't, those two working together both learned something because he asked the question. He went back to him and said, hey, help me. What section in the code am I violating by doing this or not doing this? And when the inspector could not find that, they both were like, oh, but then they found something else that were like, well, you're still doing it wrong because of this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, I was helping a journeyman putting in an enclosure.
Yeah.
Some relays in the enclosure, conduit simply coming up into the middle. And so he pulls out a ground bushing on this enclosure. It's a fresh knockout.
Yeah.
There's no compromise connection here. And I said, well, what are you putting that ground bushing on there for? He goes, well, there's relays in this cabinet. I said, okay. So why are you putting the ground bushing on there? Well, anytime there's relays in the cabinet,
you need to put a
ground bushing. I said, well, where'd you hear that? He goes, well, an inspector caught me on it one time.
Yeah.
So this guy has bought a lot of ground bushing in his career anytime he had a relay. And it's just something he always did. An inspector told him he had to do it.
Yeah.
Who knows? It could have been an explosion proof. It could have been all kinds of applications. It could have been another special bonding requirement for that environment. It could have been so many things. It could have been a local spec. It could have been all kinds of things. But this journeyman, whenever there was a relay in an enclosure, would pull out a ground bushing.
Wow.
And and he was about to retire. So too late.
Too late now. Yeah. You could have retired a little earlier. Wow. Yeah. So very important to communicate, work together. You both may learn something, or you may just learn something. You never know, right? So really important to do that. Boathouses, bathtubs, and shower stalls. We did that. Laundry areas, just did that. Okay, indoor damp and wet locations should be or wet locations. Well, we knew what we meant.
Yeah, we did.
We did. And you should too. So anything that's an indoor damp location or an indoor wet location needs to have GFCI protection. Good example of that would be your dog washing stations. I know we have these discussions about, I've seen pictures of like somebody coming in from outside and they show them full of snow and they go, well, it's just a damp location. No.
Yeah.
But a dog washing station, I could argue if you had we had this discussion yesterday about a greenhouse.
Yeah.
That was a really good discussion. They said, well, I need GFCI protection inside this greenhouse, and the greenhouse isn't covered here. But we had the debate and discussion. We said, well, is that really technically a damp location? Because if it's a greenhouse and you've got hoses everywhere and you're washing, or not washing things down, but you are watering flowers, is that a damp location? It's probably a damp location. It's probably not a wet location, but it's a damp location. So, and then the other, so and that would be indoors as well. So anyway, be mindful. Indoor damp locations and indoor wet locations. So those are the locations, 12 of them. Now we have exceptions. Now, what we did in the 2023 code cycle, we moved all the exceptions to the bottom of the list. Remember, in earlier editions, you had, for example, burglar alarms and fire alarm systems was an exception under basements.
Right. And what's the rule for exceptions and how they are used? It only applies to the basements if it says only the basements.
That's exactly right. So basements was 5, and what it said was for 5, right? And now the exception number whatever to 5. So that is only basements. So if I had a burglar alarm system or a fire alarm system, and it was in my laundry, which we expanded to all receptacles in the laundry, right? Then I would have to GFCI protect it. But then I would be in conflict with Article 760. For fire alarm, for fire alarm systems. If I had a fire alarm and I had it in my laundry or my garage, then I would be in violation or in conflict with the Article 760 that says do not put GFCI protection on that circuit. So to avoid that conflict, when we moved the exceptions, we basically, in some cases, expanded the exception beyond just those rooms. That's a good example. Of that.
Yeah.
Right. So receptacles that are not readily accessible and are supplied by a branch circuit dedicated to electric snow melting, de-icing, or pipeline and vessel heating equipment shall be permitted to be installed in accordance with 4 blah, blah, blah. Now, that's an exception. So what we did before, it was just for outside receptacles. But we said, does it matter? If it is a receptacle that is not readily accessible and is supplied by a branch circuit that is dedicated to electric snow melting, de-icing, and pipeline and vessel heating equipment, why do I care where the receptacle is at? As long as it doesn't have to be outside. What if it's inside? What if it's inside a cubby hole or something like that, right?
Right.
I should not put it on a GFCI. So we expanded that exception. The second exception, a receptacle supplying only a permanently installed premises security system shall be permitted to omit ground fault circuit interrupter protection. It doesn't say shall not have GFCI protection. It says you are permitted to omit it. So you could put it on a GFCI protected circuit. And we changed it from a burglar alarm system to a premises security system to align with NFPA standards.
Right. And frankly, security systems can be used more than just, intruder protection. Security systems can be used for a lot of other things too. Just general property protection. Sure.
Oh, never thought about that.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. All right. So now it's expanded. So it's not just basements.
So for example,
okay, go for it.
You could have a water sensor or something like that that's tied into your security system.
Yes.
So if you have a leak, you have a leak detection, and that's tied into your security system. So you're notified of potential water damage. Okay. So it's not just, intruder protection.
Right.
So
I could have used that when 80-some thousand gallons of water flowed through my house because of a frozen water pipe. See, now I'm depressed. Thanks, John.
Anytime.
All right. The third exception, there are 4. Third exception is listed weight supporting ceiling receptacles. Now, we have 2 new defined terms. Weight supporting ceiling receptacles and weight supporting attachment fittings. These are those round type of receptacles that are used for like ceiling fans and things like that, so that they're easy to be removed and connected, and they support the weight of the ceiling fan. Some of those, I think somebody said they can support up to like 300 pounds or so.
I think a little more than that. Yes. A little more than the box can.
Yep.
So
Yep. So we have an exception for those because when this is one of those, be careful what you ask for. Right. So they were first trying to get those to be required for ceiling fan boxes. They didn't get that. And then someone had the bright idea to say, well, let's put these in the definition of a receptacle so that
they are a receptacle.
Well, they are. But when you add that to the definition, then if you have that ceiling fan in your bathroom or in your laundry, and there's GFCI for any receptacle in that area, now you have to GFCI protect a lighting fixture. And they didn't want that because if I use that product, then I have to GFCI protect it. If I don't use that product, then I don't have to GFCI protect it. They didn't want to strap that to that product. So they said, we need an exception. So we gave them the exception, and now it's been tweaking over the last couple cycles. And finally, I think since they added the defined terms in Article 100 for these two items, I think we have, hopefully we will not see any more changes to this exception in at least 210.8. Anything else on that one?
No.
Exception 4, factory installed receptacles that are not readily accessible and are mounted internally to bathroom exhaust fan assemblies shall not require GFCI protection unless required by the installation instructions or the listing. Now, these are those bathroom exhaust fans. Apparently, you can unplug the motor, and there's a little 2-blade receptacle, at least on the ones I've seen. I have not seen anything with a 3-prong.
No, it's a little shaded pole motor in there. Typically, plugs right into a receptacle, so you can replace the motor. It's an easy way to replace the motor, should that ever become necessary.
Don't love it.
I don't think that. Yeah, I mean,
it's not a receptacle outlet, but it's a receptacle.
It's a receptacle, and that, like I said earlier, this is about receptacles.
That's right. It's not about the outlet.
But it's inside of a piece. I don't.
It's an assembly. I'm not even going to go there. But we needed the exception for clarity because you know what happened? 2 people got into an argument and a debate. Someone won, someone lost. And they both probably said, you know what? I want clarity. And somebody made a public input and boom, we have an exception.
Now, some fan manufacturers may require a GFCI.
And when they are required is when they are in that area, like above a shower or something like that. They'll tell you in the instructions, based upon where you install it, you may need the GFCI protected.
Yeah, so do double check the instructions on those.
Please.
Don't throw them away.
We call that dumpster diving. You know what's really nice when you say that. Here's what when I built a house. My builder, when he turned over the keys, John Carcasi, he gave me this binder. And the binder had the instruction sheets from all of the products that he installed in my home, including receptacles, GFCI receptacles, the appliances, fans, everything. It was fantastic. I never realized the value of it until I needed to either replace something, fix something, and try to figure out how something works. I went to that binder constantly. So if you are a builder, if you are in the electrical trade too, do your customer a favor. Put those instruction leaflets in a little folder. I mean, he put them in a binder, whatever. I don't care. Give it to your homeowners or the facility.
Let's put that in the building code, Tom.
Ooh, I like the way you think. But no, now we're going to barcodes. So anyway. All right, informational note to see 760.41b and 121B, those are for your fire alarm systems, for power supply requirements for fire alarm systems. So we did not duplicate the requirements. Go back and look at that. And then, quite frankly, that could probably come out later on. It's one of those probably educational mods. Doesn't need to be there, because if you have a fire alarm system, you should be in 760 anyway.
Right. And not too many homes have a fire alarm system.
That's true.
Yeah.
Dwelling units.
Yeah, true. It uses code term. Not too many dwelling units have a fire alarm system. They have single or multi-station alarms.
Yep.
But they don't have a fire alarm panel in their home or anything like that.
Yep. All right. And that is 210.8A, a dwelling unit. Anything else? Any closing remarks on dwelling units?
I think we're done.
Awesome. All right. 210.8B.
Now, a lot of items in B, other than dwelling units, got added, and there's a lot of correlation between dwelling units and other than dwelling units because electrons behave the same.
Yes, that little electron. He is something else. He's lazy, takes the shortest path all the time, right? And party animal. Anytime there's a fault, they all want to go. And they don't care what country they're in. They don't speak any different languages. They don't know if they're in a dwelling unit or not.
Nope.
So a lot of the examples that we see, and there's 15 areas in B, but a lot of them are similar to dwelling units because the hazards are the same. You want to read the parent text of B?
Go for it.
Parent text of B tells us that we have to have GFCI protection on the 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles, just like we had in A.
Same.
Supplied by single phase, and here's the difference. Single phase branch circuits rated 150 volts or less to ground, 50 amps or less. Remember, dwelling units was anything. This cuts it off at 50 amps or less. And then receptacles supplied by three-phase branch circuits rated 150 volts or less to ground, 100 amps or less. So now we picked up three-phase and single phase, but we cut them off at 50 and 100. 50 amps single phase, 100 amps three-phase. Now, because of the language in A, which was generic, it covered both three-phase and single-phase. Didn't matter, and there was no limits.
Right.
Because rarely do you see three-phase in a dwelling unit. But other than dwelling units, we hit, they have to be 150 or 125 volt or through 250 volt receptacles. Branch circuits are either going to be a 50 amp or 100 amp, 50 amp single phase, 150 volts to ground or less, or three phase, 100 amps or less, 150 volts to ground or less. Anything, I miss anything on the parent text?
Nope, almost basically incorporating three-phase in a higher amperage.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And it doesn't say that it has to be in the receptacle or in the breaker, like for the 100 amps, or like if you have a 100 amp branch circuit going to a receptacle feeding, remember, these are still receptacles.
Right, not hardwired.
These are not hardwired. These are receptacles. So if you're feeding a appliance that's in, say, a bathroom or a kitchen, and it's a 100 amp branch circuit, you're probably not going to get, a 100 amp three-phase circuit breaker, GFCI.
Probably not.
So you're probably going to have some sort of interface in between the breaker, because you're not going to get a 100 amp GFCI receptacle either. Okay?
Not that I know.
Not that I know of. So that is probably going to be achieved by a separate sort of a GFCI relay or protective device that is listed to UL 943 and has to it has to be a Class A GFCI because it's in the parent text of 8. And since it's a GFCI, by definition, it's going to be a Class A device. So it's important to understand where you can put the GFCI protection. All right, so do we want to hit? So I'll show you. I'm going to read the sections.
Let me take over. Let me read
You take them, please.
Yeah, we got 15 items here. So we got bathrooms, we got kitchens, areas with sink and permanent provisions for food preparation, beverage preparation, or cooking. This one here is different. Buffet serving areas with permanent provisions for food serving.
That was added in 2023.
Yep, that was added. And so if you have like a restaurant and you have a open hot table where customers or even restaurant personnel would go and serve food. That would be an area like that. Rooftops, outdoors.
Rooftops. That's not in dwelling units, is it?
No. So
But what rooftop is not outdoors? Why do we throw rooftops there? I mean, could you have a rooftop that is not outdoors?
what if you had two buildings? I don't know. You had a building going over another building with an awning.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, does that mean if I
Outdoors
have,
is
let's say I
outdoors.
have on a roof, let's say it's a flat roof and I have a little square building up there. I don't know what, a greenhouse. I don't know. Okay. That since it's on a rooftop, would I need to have any receptacle even in those little like accessory buildings that might be on top of a rooftop? I mean, rooftops are going to be outside.
If you keep talking like that, I'm going to put your tractor on your stuff. Okay. Sinks where receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed or stationary appliances are installed within 6 feet from the top edge of the inside edge of the bowl of the sink. We have that.
Yep.
Indoor damp or wet locations. Locker rooms with associated showering facilities. So that's the difference.
Here's the thing. In dwelling units, we have shower stalls.
Yeah. Your typical dwelling unit doesn't have a locker room.
No, not the locker room, but the shower stalls.
Right. But not any
Wait a
locker
second,
room.
though.
The locker room has to have an associated showering facility. You just can't have a locker room.
Right. So it's keyed off the shower.
Yeah.
So I got that in dwelling units by the shower. If I have a shower, what is it?
Yeah, but wasn't there was there a distance on that?
Any
6 feet.
receptacle within 6 feet.
Right here, there's no distance.
Oh, so it's every receptacle in that area.
In that locker room, associated showering facilities. Yes. So you got the 6 feet that's gone. Garages, accessory buildings, service bays, and similar areas other than vehicle exhibition halls and showrooms. Crawl spaces at or below grade level, unfinished areas of basements, aquariums.
Oh, that has
Unfinished.
unfinished.
Yeah, unfinished areas of basements. Where
Okay.
in a dwelling unit, it's
Yeah.
all basements.
Right. We took the unfinished out because we had the debate. Remember, we had unfinished and finished.
Right.
Then we just said, look, it doesn't matter. If it's unfinished and finished, it's everything in the basement. But we never did it in other than dwelling units.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think some people brought up some other discussion about that, about, in a commercial environment, the basement use is different. People are going, I don't know.
The electron knows it's
Yeah.
in a high-rise building's basement.
I
There's some
remember,
weird little buggers.
I remember one comment said, someone's more likely to be barefoot in their dwelling unit basement than their commercial. I don't know. I've worked in office buildings where plenty of people are walking around with just their socks on because that's what they said.
Oh,
That's what they said. Aquariums, bait wells, and similar open
That's new.
aquatic vessels.
that's new for
Yeah.
23.
So, or containers such as tanks or bowls where receptacles are installed within 6 feet from the top inside edge or rim or from the conductive support frame of the vessel or container.
Yeah.
So, the Northwest or other places like fish hatcheries,
Yes.
you might have these tanks with small fish in, or as
Oh, no.
the fish come through, and then and you have the small baby fish coming through, and then the people pick them up.
The
And they,
baby fish.
yeah, what was that called? Frog.
I don't
Anyway, and they pick them up and they trim off one of the fins so they know if it came from a hatchery or not.
Oh,
That would be an example. But
another example is a bait supply.
it's,
I mean,
live bait.
Live bait. When you go fishing, you stop off at the sporting goods store that has those bins where you have all your minnows and crawfish and whatnot, and you put those in the bait tackle and those.
Don't forget, this does just say aquariums too.
Oh wait, no, but I'm thinking of aquariums. Yeah.
So in an office, like a dentist's office, doctor's office, they have an aquarium there. Needs to be GFCI.
The challenge on aquariums, obviously, I think when people think aquariums, they think of the aquariums that are like sitting on a counter or something you might see in a dwelling unit.
That's what I knew.
Well, but in some of these, like the doctor offices and stuff like that, some of those are built in. If it's not built in, Put it this way. You're in construction. If the doctor says, you know what, I'm going to add an aquarium, they're not going to get it, install the aquarium before final. They're going to, when they move all their stuff in, they're going to go out, buy an aquarium, sell it out there in the waiting room. Okay, you're never going to have GFCI protection on that receptacle because it's after the fact, right? But in some of those, very likely,
Yeah.
in some of those applications, though, they'll build in the large aquariums, almost like a frame it in.
Sure.
And they build that in because it's a feature for that area,
Right.
right? That is much more substantial, would definitely be something that is there, probably on a drawing.
Oh, you got a hole in the wall. What's going in there?
What's going in there, right? So those instances, but the whole aquarium thing, arguably, I could give you examples where I'm going to put an aquarium in after the fact, and am I going to have GFCI protection on it? Probably not on that receptacle because it wasn't a part of the plans, wasn't part of rough in.
Agreed. Number 14, laundry areas.
Same thing as the other, right?
Same thing as the other. And then 15, bathtubs and shower stalls where receptacles are installed within 6 feet of the outside edge of the bathtub or shower.
And that's the same as the dwelling out. So what we're seeing in the code during our code cycles is we're trying to get here's what happens. We make a requirement like the areas that are similar to kitchens where it says or, right? And we did that for the Starbucks and the Dunkin' Donuts and whatever, those little kiosks and whatnot that you might see in a mall, right? But then someone said, well, if it's a hazard there, then isn't it a hazard in the dwelling unit? So we see this moving back and forth. You get something in A and someone says, well, why isn't it in B? And then you get it in B and they'll say, well, why isn't it in A? So you get this back and forth, and we're trying to get better at that, at them both locations. But at some point, someone has to say, what's the real difference between A and B? We have a lot of common areas.
We do. And I think that's a good thing, because it's better to be proactive. I mean, a lot of these are here because someone died.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Don't want to wait for someone to die to get something in the code every time.
And that's
and that's a challenge.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it's a sometimes
a sad challenge.
It is a sad challenge. Yep.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And we have exceptions, right?
We have a handful of exceptions. There's 6 of them. And so snow melting, we've got that.
Same as in dwelling.
Rooftops, or receptacles on rooftops shall not be required to be readily accessible other than from the rooftop.
Okay. So, but here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I think that might go back to when we were thinking that a key, like if you have a locked door going to no, that's not about the door. You know what that is? That's when you got to put a ladder to get on the roofs.
Right.
That's why that's in there. If it was a locked door, it's still readily accessible because a key is not a tool, right? So you could still have a locked door and say that receptacle is readily accessible because put it this way, this building here, any of these receptacles are on this side of the main door and you have to key in to get in here. So that's a locked door. Oh, is it readily accessible from the outside? No, it's not.
Right.
But so the key, we had to deal with that in readily accessible. But for a roof, especially a commercial roof, you may need to have a ladder to get on the roof to get to that. So they put that language in to say the receptacles on the roof have to be readily accessible from the roof. Make sense?
Makes sense. Number 3, this is the big one. Receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed and stationary appliances installed within 6 feet from the top inside edge of a bowl of a sink shall not be required to be GFCI protected in industrial establishments.
Hold on, we got to go back up. We missed something. We missed a major change in B. We flew right over it. Within 6 foot of a sink, the measurement is not a receptacle within 6 foot of the sink. It is, but we added fixed or stationary appliances within 6 foot. Go to B.
I'm on B.
Sinks,
Yeah.
where receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed or stationary appliances.
So we have that as well.
Now, so here's what happened. That change recognizes that it's not the receptacle that's the hazard, it's the appliance. So my receptacle doesn't have to be within 6 foot if my appliance is within 6 foot.
Sinks where receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed or stationary appliances are installed within 6 feet. True.
Right.
Now, you look.
So one of the shifts that we had in I guess revelations that we had in the 2023 code cycle was that the hazard is not the receptacle. The hazard is the appliance where that's plugged into the receptacle. So we made some changes. That's why we expanded to all receptacles in a kitchen, because we couldn't do what we did in 210.8b in 210.8a. In B, we keyed off of the fixed or stationary appliances.
Right on.
All right.
So very similar to what we did in A.
Yep. And then when we made that change, we changed the exception, which is what got us down this road. We changed that exception for industrials. And we actually were fixing it in 2026 because we sort of lost the original intent of that exception. The way it's written right now, we sort of opened the exception up a much further than what our intention was. So the exception now says receptacles or cord and plug fixed and stationary appliances installed within 6 foot. So what this does for an industrial, if I have a receptacle within 6 foot of the top inside edge of a bowl or sink, it isn't required to be GFCI protected.
Where the conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified personnel are involved.
So, I could make the argument that all I have in my industrial establishment are qualified personnel. And now any receptacle within 6 foot of a sink. And then any sink, right? Because it's generically written. And the other thing we did, it says, an assured equipment grounding conductor program in accordance with 590.6b2 shall be permitted, not required. So one of the changes that we're working on, I don't know if it's going to survive because it's too early in the process for 2026, is to address that issue with that exception for industrials. So I don't know where we'll end up, but right now, the way that exception is written, receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed and stationary appliances installed within 6 foot from the top inside edge of a bowl of a sink shall not be required to be GFCI protected in an industrial establishment where the conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified personnel are involved.
So you have 3 more exceptions left.
Yes. Receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed or stationary appliances installed within 6 foot of the top inside edge of a bowl or sink shall not be required to be GFCI protected in industrial laboratories where the receptacles are used to supply equipment if removal of power should introduce a greater hazard. And then in 5, receptacles located in patient bed locations of category 2, that's your general care locations, or category 1, which is your critical care applications, spaces of healthcare facilities shall be permitted to comply with 517.21, which, in my opinion, I didn't need that because it's in chapter 5. 517.21 can supplement and modify 210.8.
Right.
But it's there for clarity. Exception number 6, listed weight supporting. This is the same exception that we covered in dwelling units. That's that weight supporting ceiling receptacle and the weight supporting attachment fitting that is a receptacle. If it's in any of those locations, they do not need to be GFCI protected.
Correct.
And that is 210.8b.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Did we miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty darn thorough.
All right. We got C.
We got C. C for crawl space.
lighting outlets. This is crawl space lighting outlets.
Yes.
So 120 volts, not exceeding 120 volts, that was driven by a death of multiple deaths of individuals who were in a crawl space, backed up, broke the light bulb, and were electrocuted.
Right.
So we have a GFCI protection for crawl spaces. That hasn't changed in a while since it's been put in.
Right.
Did not change in the 2023 code cycle. Then D, this again, because of remember, we recognized the appliance is the hazard. We made changes in A that any receptacle in a kitchen, but that is only receptacle, cord and plug connected appliances.
Yeah, this is different now.
This is different. B was other than dwelling units, again, receptacle, cord and plug, and we said if the appliance is within 6 foot of the sink. D is GFCI protection for branch circuits or outlets that supply appliances, and they have a list of 12 appliances rated 150 volts or less to ground and 60 amps or less, single or three-phase. I'll just throw the appliance list on the screen so you see them. I'm not going to read through each of those, but those are a list of appliances that we've recognized have had a body count associated.
So also, we have a variety of experience levels probably looking at this video. And so when we say outlet, we don't mean a receptacle. It's a common colloquial term used. We go by the definition. And a brief paraphrase of that definition is basically where we can attach to the wiring system of a building or premises wiring system. It's a very rough paraphrase. So if you have a junction box, you have access to those wires that are in there to attach anything, that's an outlet. If I were to put a receptacle on there, it would become a receptacle outlet. If I were to put a lighting fixture on there, it's a lighting outlet. So just to be clear.
Yes, very, very.
Because that's going to be really important when we get to F.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very important. Yes. So this picks up, I don't care, like he says, I don't care if it's hardwired or cord and plug connected, but this list of appliances is important to anywhere. It doesn't say if it's in a dwelling unit. It doesn't tell you if it's in a commercial building. I don't care where these appliances are located. You need to have that outlet GFCI protected. Can't be in the cord of the appliance. It has to be protected.
We didn't make that distinction in C. Notice now we are away from occupancy types.
Yeah.
C, D, these are independent of occupancy.
That's right. Yeah. So very important to know, not driven off of the occupancy. All right. Anything else on specific appliances?
Nope.
All right. Equipment requiring servicing. That's what I was thinking of. E. If you have, and it's 210.63, equipment requiring servicing. So in 210.63, go back and take a look at 210.63 because you'll see your HVAC equipment like panel boards and things like that. We restructured 210.63 during the 2023 code cycle as well. Made it a little bit easier to understand. But there are areas where you have a equipment that requires a receptacle for maintenance personnel. And what we're requiring here is that those receptacles are GFCI protected. Did not change in the 2023 code cycle, but it is a requirement that you need to know about. And go back and check 210.63. Those are the receptacles that we're talking about. Good?
Well said.
Finally, last but not least, outdoor outlets. And it's not a very controversial topic. Outdoor outlets, 210.8S. Now, remember, this was dwelling unit only. It was a dwelling unit outdoor outlet. We expanded that beyond just a dwelling unit. We said for dwelling units, all outdoor outlets other than those covered in 210.8A exception number 1, which 8A exception number 1 are the receptacles that are readily accessible for those snow melting, de-icing, etc. Other than those, including outlets installed in the following locations, supplied by a single-phase branch circuit rated 150 volts or less to ground 50 amps or less, shall be provided with GFCI protection. Garages that have floors located at or below grade level, accessory buildings, and boathouses. So those locations were added in the 2023 code cycle, in addition to just the outdoor outlets on a dwelling unit. And we said, if the equipment supplied by an outlet covered under the requirements of this section are replaced, you need to supply GFCI protection. I'd almost say that was covered by 406.
No,
4D.
no, because 406 is receptacles. This is outlets. Okay, that's why it's more specific. That's why we need it here, but we don't need it elsewhere because 406 is talking about receptacles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was, I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose.
Well done. Well done.
Okay, so now some people say, well, this is just for HVAC equipment. No, it's for any equipment that is hardwired to an outlet or wired through an outlet on the outdoor of a dwelling unit, garages that have floors located at grade or below grade level, accessory buildings, and boathouses. So that gets, if you have sump pumps, you have well pumps, anything like that. That's not cord and plug connected to an outlet. It could be cord and plug connected too, but that's already covered by outdoors.
Yeah. What about the exceptions?
We only have two. We only have two, John. Exception number one is GFCI protection shall not be required on lighting outlets other than those covered in 210.8c. And what are, John? What are the 210.8c lighting outlets? Crawl space lighting outlets. Very good.
C for crawl space.
Yeah, C for crawl space. That's a good one. Yes.
C for crawl space, D for specific appliance.
That's right. D for appliances.
Yeah, that's how the code works.
That's how the code works. Exception number two is GFCI protection shall not be required for listed HVAC equipment, and the exception expires September 1st, 2026, which is 2 years from now. A little over 2 years.
Yeah.
So, because it's 2024 when we recorded this. So, GFCI protection for that HVAC equipment, and that's just because of the issue that we've recognized of leakage currents tripping the GFCIs. I'm not going to get into I will get into the details around that. That could be left for a separate video, but suffice it to say, if it's listed HVAC equipment, you have an exception that you don't need the GFCI protect that outlet until September 1st, 2026. We good?
We're good. I think that covers it quite
That
thoroughly.
covered 210.
And it's kind of fun. And it's kind of fun doing it.
It was, wasn't it? It's a great discussion.
Yeah.
You know, and I like the what you got was two individuals who were heavily involved in all of these requirements, because John, you were on the committee when we did the 2023, as was I.
Yep.
You represented IBEW, I represented NEMA at the time. And we agreed sometimes, we disagreed sometimes, but we all have the same goal. I believe most of us have the same end goal in mind, which is to increase electrical safety.
Oh, I can't think of any time we disagreed when it came to GFCI.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, we did. We aligned very well on that, as do many others on the code panel. There's only a few that really push back. And again,
I'm looking forward to you coming around on my opinions.
Hey, if I wanted your opinion, I'd give you mine. Okay.
I'll raise my hand when you raise yours.
No, thank you. Beautiful. All right. John, thank you. And thank you for watching through the program. This session, you may have caught each individual section, or you watched the entire thing. Either way, thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of it, because I know I did. Thanks.
Excellent.
You're welcome. All right, brother. Catch you later. You know what that means?